What's up, everybody? Party Science here with Lefty. Today I have the one and only JuanCarlos with me. I am super excited to be sitting down with him because it has been a minute trying to get him to book something with me. But now that we have, the reason I'm so excited is because he has been the person that I have known to always be about giving back to the community. Whether it's just any conversation I've had with him, it's always about, hey, talk to this person. Did you do this? I met him years ago, and he's always been a true supporter of everything that I've done. I can say that. And I've just been more than thankful to have some time with him today. So, JuanCarlos,
Hey,
thank you for
nice to
having
see
me
you,
in. I
man.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, my question to you, because I feel like I know you more boys and girls and the youth tech stuff you used to
Yep.
do and things like that, but like, did you grow up in Lowell or like where did you grow up?
No, I mean, yeah, I was born in Puerto Rico,
Okay.
and then but pretty much raised here in Lowell. So I was raised in the Acre, and the way that I actually got started was I started my first job. I actually had a parent liaison who came up to me, and I think he knew that in high school I was kind of just like kind of going through the motions, and he said to me like, "You ever consider doing something with your community?" And immediately I was just like, what does that mean? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so he said, let's look, he gave me a flyer and he said, just check it out. You might find some benefit in doing something in the community. And so at the time there was an organization called Planned Parenthood, and they were basically recruiting young people to go out on the street to talk to other young people about a number of health topics.
Okay.
And so
What was that like day one of
it
that?
was crazy
Yeah.
because I'll be honest with you. At
So
first,
you were like the street team in a sense.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and and at first I thought it wasn't going to be a big deal, but I have to say it's the foundation of where I got the skills to be able to talk to people. Because I honestly I had to go up to other young people who didn't really have to talk to me and build a relationship, right? And then have to have conversations about things that not weren't always comfortable. But I loved it. I the fact that I was able to kind of connect with folks, and then in school it kind of turned into I was like the guy that if folks needed something or had a question about something that they wouldn't feel comfortable in asking the teacher, they'd ask me, and then I'd be like, let me get back to you, and I'd go to ask some of the professionals, and so yeah, so that just kind of started my journey on knowing that whatever I did, I wanted to work with young people, and I also wanted to do something with the community.
Okay.
So
So how did that transition like kind of walk me through how you go from the Planned Parenthood beginning type of
yeah,
work
yeah.
to where you've gotten now where you're at the Boys and Girls Club? Like how did that progress happen for you?
So I used to live at Moody. They used to call them Moody Projects or North Canal Apartments, and at the time I was doing Planned Parenthood, and there was a community organizer that knocked on our door and basically said, "Hey, they're gonna shut down where you live, and they're gonna basically tear it up and make condos." And they asked my mom. They said, "Hey, would you be willing to go out and kind of talk to other people and let them know what's happening?" And so basically, I was watching her knocking on doors and having people come to our house, and that was just another level of like, I want to do some of this, right? And so it was. I actually reached out to CBA, Coalition for a Better Acre, which is a huge agency here in Lowell, and they recruited me as their youth organizer. And so
So how old were you at this point?
I was probably, I want to say maybe
Late teens?
16,
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
15,
Maybe
16.
teen, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But again, I was knocking on doors, and the idea, and I was attached to an actual community organizer, right? Like it was me, almost kind of like apprenticeship kind of situation. And I would knock on doors, and people would welcome us in, and they'd give us little treats, but what I learned was that there were so many people that had some of the same concerns, and they were sharing the same kind of fears, and the biggest thing is that they needed that place, right? They needed somewhere to live. And so that was my first time actually doing an organizing campaign where we worked with the community to basically buy North Carolina Apartments from HUD for $1. And so it's so that no matter what happened, it would always stay as affordable housing for folks, which I love because every time I drive by, now I know that I was a part of that. And I know that, for me, it's funny because people say, oh, you lived in Moody Projects. And I'm like, I loved it. I mean, everybody knew our business, but it was kind of like that whole theme of like it takes a village to raise people, and but I loved it. I to this day I still have friends that were from that community. So from there, I ended up going to I now at this point I was looking for work, and they were looking for a street worker, and I had reached out to this woman that was doing street work and working on the street, and I had told her some of the stuff that I had done, and she had said to me, "Well, what if you were one of the street workers in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club? What do you think?" And so I said, yeah, I think it'd be great. What she forgot to mention was that it was all specifically to be around gang involved youth. And so I had no experience. I remember me asking, I was like, once I was the first day on the job, I'm like, how am I supposed to connect? Like, how's this gonna work? And she's like, you're fine. You live in Moody. I'm sure you'll connect with people. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. But the great thing was, honestly, she left me. I remember, I'll never forget this day. She left me at North Common Park actually, and everybody was playing basketball. I don't know how to play basketball, and I was trying to figure out how I'm gonna get in there and connect to folks. And so I did what I always do, which is comedy, right? So I walked in, and I was watching them for a little bit. They were like, "Who's this kid?" And at one point, I stopped them and I go, "Hey, listen, if you want someone to teach you how to really play basketball, like I've been trained all over." I came up with this whole story, and they're like, "Oh, really? Okay." And then they started watching me play, and they died laughing. But it broke the ice, right? Like it got them to go. What? I was like, "What? These are European skills I'm trying to show you here." So we got talking, and then what happened was that it opened the door for me to just learn more about what they needed. And then once I came through and helped them out with like, hey, this is what you needed, then they started building the trust and they started connecting me to other young people. And honestly, that's how UTEC was born. We had there was a lot of gang
Because you were
violence.
early stages UTech from
Oh,
what
I was
yeah.
one of the founders. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah, one of the 5 founders. And so there was a lot of gang violence happening in Lowell, like specifically between Latinos and Southeast Asians. And to me, I remember it getting so bad because I would go to visit my grandmother, and she would have stories about like, oh, I'm scared to go out and something's gonna happen to me. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wow, this is in people's homes. Like people are talking about this. And so we all got together and we rallied a lot of young people and we said, what is it that you guys want to see? Like, how do we address this situation? And at the time, downtown Lowell was considered a neutral zone. One, because it has a lot of cops there. There was a lot of businesses. So no one really came downtown to kind of do any
Start
kind of,
trouble,
yes,
yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. So we were like, all right. They wanted a youth center. So we started looking around. St. Anne's Church, at the time, they had a whole building that they weren't even utilizing.
Was that the one right next to Lowell High?
Yep.
Okay, I remember
right.
those. I went there.
Yeah.
Salsa classes.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah, I remember.
So we approached the pastor at the time, and we said to him, would you be interested? And the funny thing is, he said no because it was kids, right? Like I was like maybe 18, 19 years old at this point. And so we ended up teaming up with some adults, or what they would consider adults. We had the meeting again, and they said yes. And then this time, we basically said to them, "Hey, can we use this?" There was like 4 rooms. Can we take over these 4 rooms? And they were like all over it. We had some rent. We wrote our first grant, which that was a new experience for me to write a grant. We got the grant, so we were pretty much good for about 6 months. And then we had to figure out how are we going to sustain this. And so I remember we did a flyer, and the whole thing was like, come see UTEC, come check it out. At the time, it wasn't even called UTEC yet, but we had come check us out. And we had 300 young people show up.
That's
like
awesome.
It was packed.
That's awesome.
And the hard part about it is that we had nothing planned other than like we thought we would have got maybe like 15, 20, 300 showed up. There was no basketball courts. There was no games, nothing. And we decided to divide everybody up into small groups, and we just started having focus groups. And honestly, all we did was listen. We just took flip chart paper and just kept asking, what do you want this place to look like? Everything from, that's how we got the name, which was called United, at the time, United Teen Equality Center. They came up with it. We started talking about what kind of programs you want. They created the programs, and we had such a like an eclectic kind of thing because it was like Soups on, which did cooking. We had capoeira. We had some jujitsu in there as well. We had like salsa classes. Like everything was so, for me, very culturally diverse. And I think that was one of the reasons why the kids loved it because it was something that they weren't seeing. Um, and then, we had some computer classes. And ultimately from there, we, unfortunately, the story was that we were there probably about, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years before the new pastor came in. And he just had a different direction for what he wanted to use that space. And we hadn't even thought about the idea of like, oh, because we didn't own it. I was like, what happens now, right? And so we did what we've always done, right? We turned to the community and we said to folks, help us find out where do we go? Like, how do we find our new home? And as a temporary measure, we ended up moving to downtown Lowell on Merrimack Street. And it was kind of cool because even though we were sad to lose the space that we were in, we had all the young people help us move and set up the new space. And so there was this transition of making sure that the same kind of feeling that you had at the original UTEC, you would get at this new place. And we had 2 floors, but even there, we were met with some resistance because as soon as we moved in, there was an article in the newspaper that basically said, UTEC increases crime in downtown Lowell. And we were like, wait, what? We just got here. It's like, and so we were disappointed to see that because a lot of it was perception, right? There was a lot of young people in downtown, and there were folks that are walking and assuming the worst. So again, we were like, how do we handle this? And we turned to each other. We turned to the young people.
And this is like pre-social media, really.
Oh
So like
yeah, this was all
you're trying to,
flyers.
yeah, yeah, you're
We were
trying to like,
knocking doors.
yeah,
There
yeah,
was not even.
yeah.
We weren't even. I think AOL was still a thing. So this is back in the day.
Right, right.
But what was great about it is that the kids were like, why don't we just invite them? Why don't we invite them to come meet us? And I love that idea because even in the gang intervention work that I've done, every single time that we've built relationships with another group, it changes. It's so much harder for you to attack or have a problem with somebody once you know their story, once you know who they are, once you've built those relationships. And so we did the same thing. We're like, well, let's do the same thing with the businesses. So we invited them all. We cooked them an amazing dinner for them. And we did a whole circle and we asked them, what are you fearful of? And a lot of it was, well, you're all wearing black jackets. And we weren't sure if that meant that everybody was in a gang. And we're like, no, it's just a style. We're all wearing black, it's cold. But the kids actually started thinking about, okay. And then when you were walking by, some of the folks were saying, I'm nervous when I walk by because folks don't move. So you're seeing the young people actually saying to other young people, hey, listen, when we see our neighbors coming through, let's just give them some space so that they don't feel uncomfortable. We were saying hi more to people. They were saying hi to us. It just changed the dynamic. And we also recognize this is not where we want to be for the rest of our, the duration of UTEC. So we asked them, help us find a home that we own. And that kind of stirred this whole conversation of people picking up the phone and just saying, hey, where's UTEC's new home? And it took a while, but St. Anne's Church, which is where UTEC is right now, was also closing. I feel like things were all aligned, and we were there for about 2 years, but they reached out to us and said, would this be something that you guys would be interested in? We did a tour and it needed work, but we fell in love with it. We were like, we could envision all the different things. And then the best part is that we owned it. So no matter what happened, no one was going to ask us to leave, right? It was like, this is a permanent home for all of us. And again, the same thing. We had it was 340 young people march through downtown to our new home. And that was our way of just kind of celebrating that, yes, we're leaving downtown, but we now have our new place. And they helped us remodel the place. We created programming that was connected to construction and making sure that it made sense so that young people were getting credit. Um, so what started off as a drop-in center turned into what it is today, right? It's job opportunities. You can get your high school or GED or high set now, what they call high set. Um, it gives an opportunity for individuals that are like coming out of incarceration a second chance. I mean, for me, one of the things I love is, again, Lowell to me is like a special place because at every corner there's something that I can like look at and go, wow, this is hopefully gonna be there way after I'm gone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so UTEC is one of those places. You know, I see all these young people that I bump into, you know, and they're saying UTEC Nation, UTEC Nation. Um, and it just brings me so much pride because I know what that means, and I also know the work that they have to do to kind of get to where they are, right? Um, and I don't take that for granted because for me, I think most people don't understand that when someone decides to say, I'm going to have you be a part of my journey, that's a huge step, right? It's not something that people just do in a whim, right? Especially if you've had some hard times, right? You kind of feel guarded.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to see these young people choose, because they don't have to go to UTEC, to choose to go to UTEC, to trust the staff at UTEC, to make sure that they're taking what they thought life had handed them and changing that into something else, you can't beat it, right? So yeah, I was there for 16 years, and then I probably would have been there to this day, except that I started thinking about another problem that not just our community but other communities have is the homeless population. And I kept thinking, I was like, wow, you know, we've covered work, we've covered education, we've covered a place for folks to kind of socialize, but all of that doesn't work if you are cold, if you don't have a place to go home and sleep. And so I started talking to UTEC and saying, hey, you know, I've been here 16 years, but I think I want to break out and start a homeless shelter for teens. And and that kind of started the conversation. It took me about 3 or 4 years to kind of really leave. Um, and then finally, when I left, I actually created a plan. I ended up giving that plan to another organization to execute, which was executed in the city. Because at the time, the Boys and Girls Club reached out to me and said, hey, we have somebody that's on maternity leave. Would you be okay with coming in and covering that person? And I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? Why not? Um, and within a month, Joe, who's the executive director, said to me, would you be interested in being the number two in our organization? And at first, I actually thought, I was like, do I want to do that? But honestly, I fell in love with I've always worked with teens. And so to be able to now work and make an impact with kids that are like 8 years old, that was really interesting to me. And it was a whole different ball game because I had little kids like in my office crying, and I'm like, what happened? And I'm immediately thinking it's like major crisis. And he's like, he stole my Pokemon card. And I'm like, I could deal with this. I feel you.
Yeah,
I feel you because that would bother me too.
yeah, right.
And you know, and it also gave me an opportunity to be able to kind of showcase some of the stuff that I love. Right, I'm a big Marvel fan. I'm a big DC fan.
Yeah, I saw.
You know,
Yeah.
so anime, and so I
Mhm.
have an opportunity to just be able to talk to young people about things that are important to them. Um, so yeah, it's just been now I've been here. It's crazy, but I'm going on my 12th year.
That's
So
awesome.
so it's pretty good.
So you had 16 years with UTech. You've been here for 12 years, and then you had a like an in between period, or you went straight from there to here.
Yeah, I had almost a year where I was doing consulting, and during that year I was helping out with Justice Resource Institute, At the time, it was called Conquer Family Youth Services, and I had given them my plan to like, hey, continue doing this, and they did a version of what the shelters would look like. But the beauty of it is that UTEC now just got what they're doing, kind of scattered sites where they have apartments where they're now giving opportunities for young people to have a place to live.
Nice.
So it's kind of come full circle to make sure that they get the full services. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but it's been fun.
That's really cool, man. So let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
What's it like getting that first grant, drawing everything up to get that? Like,
Um,
you had never done it before, so explain to me a little bit about how that came together.
so the funny thing is that we were given a lot of responsibility, right? And I have to give this credit to Kathy Muldoon and Steve Perswick. They both saw the potential of what we can do, and I think at that time we were like 18, 19 year olds going, we've never done this, and they basically said, give it a try. And so I would be lying to you if I said to you that we wrote the grant and it was just like, oh, this is easy. No, we had several drafts of trying to
Right, right,
figure it
right.
out. And, there were things that for me, there's a big joke because I tend to write a lot about feelings and really expressing what's happening. But in the grant writing world, they're just like, you have one page. So I need you to chop this down. And so it was hard for us to kind of look at it and go, oh, but that's important. We learned the hard way how to do that. Um, and then, we sent out several grants that year before we got this one grant that said yes. And we ended up getting, I think it was $40,000. You would have thought we won the
The
Mega
lotto,
Millions. We
yeah.
were jumping up and down. We were screaming, we did it, we did it. And, at the time, it felt like a lot of money. But once you start talking about paying rent and light, and eventually we were all volunteers, but we had to hire an executive director. And we knew I was still in college. Um, so we ended up posting, which is funny, we ended up posting this little ad because we didn't have a lot of money. And it just said executive director wanted. And we just sent it. And we got 3 people, which we were kind of surprised about, but we did. The first 2 it was just not gonna work. For us, we knew that we needed somebody that really understood what we were talking about. Like, we need you to listen. Like, we needed someone that understood what it really meant to do youth work, and that's how we got Greg. So Greg came in right from the very beginning. He was one of those people that we were just like, huh, this guy's different. um, and we interviewed him. Everybody felt like, yep, I think this is our guy. We hired him. The thing that sealed the deal was on our first day, we all, which, I think we were all guarded, but we were all waiting for him at the front desk to come in. And we are just staring at him. Because, to some degree, we were like, oh, what is he going to do to our baby? And we knew that we were basically handing it over to somebody. And Craig walked in with a velour suit. So that was that first kind of like, oh, this is funky, right? And then he walks up to us and he greets everybody, shakes everybody's hand. Um, and we just stared at him. And the thing that got us was that he went into what we would call the gym, and he took a little notebook and flipped it open and went to each individual young person, asked them their name, what they wanted. And for us, it was just like he could have easily came in and said, this is what we're going to do. But he did the opposite. And so to see young people being able to give feedback and him like, jotting it down, like, okay, we're going to do that. We got to do this. I think all of our shoulders just were like, oh, okay, we got the right guy. I mean, and he's still there, And so, and we went from, if I combine the 2 first grants of $70,000 to now it's a $17 million organization. I mean, can't beat that.
It's you couldn't have drawn it up better in terms of the results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people ask me that all the time. They're like, did you envision this? And at the time, I always say to people, I was like, it was all about having a safe space and having a center where young people had a voice. That was the goal. there was never the idea like this is going to become a national model, which it is now. But I think that once we were like probably halfway through, I knew we had something special, and I knew that it would continue even after I was gone and other people have left. And it's kept that way. I mean, the great thing about UTech, and I think that's true for Boys and Girls Clubs too, but once you're in, there's always something, there's always a connection with people that have worked there that you see each other and you almost like pick up right where you left off. So it's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I do see that when I see you, Greg, and damn, I'm forgetting his name.
Savannah, maybe?
Well, not Savannah. He
Sako?
went he went on and he works in like politics now. I forgot his name. Not Greg.
Oh, Jeff Foster.
Jeff,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Jeff was
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
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 yeah. We
yeah,
always talked
yeah,
wrestling and stuff when
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
see
yeah.
him. Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
great dude.
It's great because a lot of the people you mentioned, they're all dedicated people, right? It was never about the money. It was never about titles or anything like that. It was all about really connecting with young people. And I have to say, I mean, people say to me all the time, they're like, "How can you work in a place so long?" And I'm like, I had a really good time. I mean, there was some scary things and there was some challenging times, but I also had a great time. So, it was one of the best things I've ever been a part of.
Nice. So you get the grant,
Yep.
you get the building, you hire the executive director.
hmm
Then from that point, you end up 4 years later moving to downtown Lowell.
Yeah, so we actually had to get actually what happened before that, we had to partner up with CTI because we weren't technically our own nonprofit. And so they became kind of our fiscal sponsor. So we did that. And then once we were about to move, we had to make a decision on whether or not we needed to be our own 501c3, which is what we did.
Right.
And it worked out great for us. But yeah, that was part of the whole journey into it. Is just the idea of us being independent and just kind of taking things on our own. And keep in mind too that the street worker program, which is where I started, used to be out of the city of Lowell. We went to them and said, well, can we make it the UTech street worker program? And so they transferred everything to us because it just made sense, right? Like it was the one department in the city that didn't really fit with what they did, and so it would fit in a youth center. And so we did that, and to this day, the Street Work program is still thriving at UTech. So,
Yeah, I mean, you still see them in downtown,
oh
kind
yeah,
of walking
oh yeah,
around.
yeah.
Is it orange
The
and black
orange,
jacket? Yeah, yeah, orange and
yeah,
black.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I was gonna say, I see how they transition from all black jackets to
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
now you can't.
Well, the orange, it's funny. People asked that question, and it was because it was one of the only colors that no gang had claim to. And then you could see us like a mile away. So that was the other
Yeah,
thing. You're like, street workers. Um, and so that was cool. And, we always joke because the kids would always see us like, whenever we'd go to a place where there was going to be a fight or something like that, they're like, how do you know? Which made me laugh is because you guys tipped us off.
right. Yeah, you were talking about it next to
You
us. Yeah,
told
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And in
yeah.
some cases, it would be the person fighting. They would say to us, "Hey, this is going down, and I'm gonna take care of this person." Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, "Okay, what time? At 2 o'clock. You better not be there." Okay, we won't. And then
Yeah, yeah,
we show up,
yeah.
and they get to save face. We get to make sure that we build a relationship. So it worked out.
Yeah. So it's almost like they were. I would think, looking back at it as an adult, not so much as the kid in the picture, but like as an adult similar to you, I would think they're almost telling you because they want to prevent it.
Oh,
You
100%.
know,
The thing,
they're,
nobody wants to look over their shoulder,
right.
right? And the thing is that everybody thinks as a spectator, a lot of kids want to see the fight. But the people that are in the fight, if there's a way of avoiding it, why not, right? It's very rare that I would bump into somebody that really just wanted to fight. If anything, they would do a lot to make sure that we knew the information. And the other thing too is that some of the stuff that we're fighting about was silly, right? Like it was either about a relationship or somebody said this, something said that. And we came in and we looked like the bad guys because we would separate the fight. We would get them to talk about and mediate the conversations, and then they would be friends. And so we were okay with being like, oh, you ruined everything. You know, that's what we
Yeah,
do. So we do. You
yeah.
know, we would joke around with them too. They'd be, and the other thing too is our young people, I love them, but it'd be like 40 kids walking in the same direction. So even if we didn't know, we're like, that's strange.
Yeah,
Where's
yeah, yeah,
everybody
yeah,
going?
yeah.
And we'd go and, you know, we'd joke as we're walking. I was like, hey guys, where's the party? Oh my God. Can you get away from us? Get away. You're going to ruin everything. I was like, if you're going, I'm going.
Yeah, yeah. We're one,
So
bro.
we're
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
on
yeah,
this.
yeah.
But you know, it worked out, and then you know there were so many kids that would tip us off by giving us calls. Um, but I think a lot of that was, you know, people wanted to feel safe. People trusted us. People knew that there wasn't more than other than helping, right? You weren't gonna. It wasn't like we were gonna call the police or anything. It was just like
Yeah, let's see if we
let's
can
try to
stop. Yeah.
mediate this problem before it
Mm.
became a bigger issue.
Right.
And so yeah, we were, and to this day, I love when I bump into like I'm in Market Basket, and someone's like, "Do you remember when?" I'm like, "Yeah, I remember."
You saved my life. You don't even know it.
So it's good. It's good memories.
Well, let me ask you this because I'm curious, right? Like I grew up in Lowell,
Yeah.
so like I had friends who were gang members and stuff like
Hmm.
that, but I was never really in it.
Yeah.
Similar to where I think kind of where your background was
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
you got
Hmm.
involved. What do you think the most common reasoning for why kids get involved with gangs is, and what do you find is a good way to help them get out of those situations?
So the main reason is friendships, right? Like, so one of the things that people don't understand is that, you know, when you go into a school system, especially if you don't know the language or you don't know anybody, most of the time you find your people. But if you don't, and let's say there's someone else that's picking on you or making your life difficult, and someone comes along and says to you, if you want this to stop, all you have to do is hang with us. Who's not going to take that deal, right? It's not, no one walks up to you and says, here, we're going to commit this crime, we're going to do this, we're going to do that.
Mm,
That's not how it starts. It all starts with this feeling of like friendship, family, connection, protection, feeling safe. The problem is that then it leads to things that you necessarily don't want to do, right? And so what we did was give them an alternative. Instead of passing judgment, instead of saying to you, "Hey, you're in a gang, you're a quote unquote bad person, or you're doing bad things," we never did any of that. We said to them, "No judgment if that's the choice you've made, but we're just asking you, would you be interested in doing this?" And the more and more our young people were in capoeira, the more and more that they were doing video production, the more and more they were making those relationships in the club, they were spending less and less time with these individuals. What they didn't know is on the back end, we would be talking to what they call OJ, OG leaders, and just saying to them, hey, listen, this kid is doing really well. And I have to tell you that 90% of the time, whoever we were talking to wanted to make sure that that kid did not end up where they were. And so they would be helping us to say, let's get them to the training that they need to do. Let's help them. And it wasn't about saying you're gonna get you out. It was more about having them help us transition this person to do something different. And so I think when you look at it that way, nobody was losing anything. Everybody felt like they were participating and helping to try to work something out. Did it always work that way? No, right? There were people that, and that was probably the hardest part of the job, was they didn't see themselves the way out. Um, and I think the other piece was when, for us, whenever we lost somebody and you were at a funeral, um, that was the hardest thing, right? Because you leave that situation going, what else could I have done? What else could I have said? What else could I, and you learn over the years that it's not about you, it's about that young person deciding what's best for them at that time. And that's how you had to think of it, right? Like you had to think about how the folks that you could support and take in the right direction, not so much the people that wouldn't want to do it. And one of the things I love about the model is that it finds you where you're at. So if somebody comes into UTech and they're just not ready, that's okay. You can go through the model 2 months from now, a year from now. you have to be mentally in a space where you want to make change. And that was true in high school when I was doing work. It's true now when the work that I'm doing here in Boys and Girls Club. I don't force any young person to do anything they don't want to do. They have to be ready for it.
So I just kind of want to revisit this because it's something that I think when you're talking about losing someone and you're talking about watching how it affected everybody and thinking about, what could you have done different? Were there any scenarios where, or any moments where that happened and you found yourself figuring out an adjustment, or like, how did you go about shaping the system to get to the point where it was impacting people much faster
Yeah.
than, at the beginning? Like, how did you develop that?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the work that we were doing is that a lot of it was new territory. And so we were learning a lot as we were going along. It wasn't like there was a street outreach there is now, but back then there wasn't.
Right.
And so, and then the other complicated thing was that you're dealing with people. So I say this now, even in the trainings that I give now, is that no one thing will work for everybody.
Right.
You have to adjust and adapt to the needs of that individual because everybody's so different. So that's what we were doing. We were, yes, did we debrief and start thinking about what we could have done differently? Yeah. But there were also moments where there was some mental health stuff that we weren't experts in, and so we had to partner with other organizations, and that was the other thing that I loved about it, is that we weren't trying to be the experts at everything. We were partnering with people that were good at what they did so that we can refer out to our kids and make sure that they had all the different services that they needed. So yeah, it was a constant conversation. It was a constant meeting with other young people, because that was the other thing too, is that I talked about the fact that it affected us, but every time we lost somebody, it affected other young people, right? And it brought up a lot of loss, not just for the fact that they lost that person, but in their own personal life. Like, it meant different things for different kids. And so a lot of it was really making the time and just trying to listen to what we could be doing differently. But I think it's important not to walk away feeling like you did something wrong, because you could have done everything right, and that young person could have still did, whatever, and happened to that person.
Wrong
So
place, wrong time
yeah,
type of
wrong
thing,
time, and
and you did everything you could.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there were many kids like that too. Like, there were kids that just started getting involved in a gang, and day one, they happened to be in the wrong, and you're just like, oh, And we were lucky enough that there were young people that did get hurt but survived, and it was enough of a wake-up call to be like, I don't want to be a part of this.
Right.
But I always tell people that whether you're gang involved or not, nobody wants to live in fear. Nobody wants to be able to look behind their shoulder all the time. It's a lot of pressure and anxiety to have, especially if you're young. So if there's a way of removing that, people jump at it,
Right.
As they should,
Right. Right. So just to kind of jump over, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit more on when you were watching your mom try to save the projects, right?
Yep.
And you were knocking on doors and doing these things. What was your mindset like? Because you're getting welcomed into the homes and
Yeah.
people are expressing these like, what did you feel it did for you and your mom and your family in terms of doing that, right? Outside of just the satisfaction of saving the building and getting it for $1,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, what was your takeaway from that?
My whole thing is, my mom has always been somebody that's taken care of others. And what I didn't realize then is that she's always been a community organizer, right? And one of the things that what I loved about what I would see is, I was embarrassed, nervous going into people's homes, right? Because you're just like, and also that's how as a Latino, that's how you're taught, right? Like, you don't you don't ask for anything. You
Yeah, 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 yeah,
you
yeah.
sit down, you just wait for and so having people going to their homes and asking them about their struggles was huge. But when I was watching my mom, and and I'd watch my community writers about, but something that my mom had a natural talent about is that she was really good, and still is, I should say, at making people feel comfortable. And that was the key, right? It wasn't about walking away saying, hey, tell me everything, or it was really more about a bond, a connection. And I don't think she even knew this because it's a natural thing that she does. Like she's a nurturer, right? But I'd be watching her, and I remember her saying to somebody, "I'm gonna call someone tomorrow, and I'm gonna find out why they're not allowing you to do this, or why haven't you got that document?" And it would be immediately she would be like, "Come on, let's go." I was like, "Where are we going?" We told them that we were gonna get back to them, and her word was her bond. Like it was really important to her that whatever she said she was gonna do, she delivered. And I think that's how she ended up getting that reputation. And I didn't know it then, but I think that it just stuck with me, right? For me, it was really important that the relationships that I built in my own community, that people knew that they can come to me if they needed help. And when I meet people, it's naturally what I do too, right? I was like, hey, what's you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, hey, what's going on? How you
Yeah.
doing? Let me connect you to this person. Let me, if you're doing this, and even now, when people say to me, hey, DJ, yep, I know exactly who you call, because I think that it starts at home, right? Like we should be doing more of that. When I think of like these huge corporations, you could be calling those people, or you can call the people your neighbor that you know is doing just as great good of work, and connecting them to other people and making those social networks. So yeah, for me it was I think a lot of the foundation of everything that I do was really watching my mother, whether she knew she was teaching me or not. It was watching her and those interactions with those people.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it was cool.
Yeah. You would see her make a promise, keep the promise, and
Yeah.
then help the next person, and she would just repeat the process.
Yeah, and more than that, she would break bread with them, right? Like it would be one of those things. Come over. What are you doing tomorrow? Come for coffee, and they'd come over to the house, and it wasn't. It didn't stop. The relation didn't stop with, "Hey, I helped you." We kept going, right? And I think we live in a world right now where people can be friendly, but it's hard to break those things, right? Like you want to be able to say, like for my mom to be able to say, "Hey, come over," and people actually show up. You know, how many times you've never been in a situation, we got to get together, we're going to do lunch, right? We're going to do, and it doesn't happen,
Right.
right?
Years go by, and then you see
Yeah,
them again. You say the same thing.
exactly, right,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
think that was one of the skills that she had, that she was, and again, they were in a time where none of this social media, none of that stuff was around. And to be able to do something as simple as let's drink coffee, and you would hear them talking. I remember being in the living room, and my mom would be talking about all kinds of stuff that had nothing to do with the original conversation, but now it was like I said, like a village. She knew a lot of things about a lot of people,
Mm.
but never talked to anybody else about it. Always kept that confidentiality, but people knew that they can go to her. And it would always shock me at how many people would knock on our door and give my mom like a legal document. And my mom was like, let me call some people and see what I get. She wasn't a lawyer, but she got them to the right place, right?
Right.
And so it's that sense of community. Um, you know,
Right. Right. So, how do you how do you think that's translated to you now? So, being here at the Boys and Girls Club with you, and now you're working with younger kids. You said 8-year-olds.
yeah,
Early
yeah,
teenagers,
yeah,
possibly. Things like
yeah,
that. How does that? How did you transition right from working with teens, gang members,
yeah.
of that sort, and then transitioning here to working with younger kids who they're working on how to express themselves at a very basic level in
Right, right, right.
comparison to the kids who would just fight about it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about that day to day now in comparison to what it was before?
Yeah, so it was really different. I'm so used to sitting down with teens, and teens just letting you know what's up. This is what I need. This is what's going on. With younger kids, they're very expressive as well, but sometimes they don't even know what's going on. And so the good news is that a lot of the same skills that I learned with working with teens, you could apply to working with younger kids. Um, but I think the difference was I needed to really get down to their level. Um, And I know this is going to probably sound strange, but for me, a lot of the things that I was doing was trying to figure out what is it that makes them excited, right? And so when I went to talk to some kids, I wouldn't go up there and say, "Hi, my name is JuanCarlos," and they look at me like blank, blank. But when I come in and be like, and sit down next to them and just pull out my Pokemon cards, and they're like, "You play Pokemon? Yeah, you don't?" You know, and then we just have this conversation. And they're like, "Yo, you have the Pikachu?" I said, "I do. Yeah, I have the Pikachu. You don't have the Pikachu?" But we were just talking, and they didn't know it. But for me, it was my way to kind of get in and have those conversations with them, and we start trading, and start having those. And they were club cards that I got from the club, right? Um, and even when we Pokemon Go, I had kids jump in a van and we drive around and we play Pokemon Go, and it was this level of like, not that you're in charge, but you get it, and I say Pokemon as just one example, but across the board, that's what I would do. I would try to figure out what is the thing that this young person is so flipping out about, like what's their thing, and how do I get involved in it. And I remember one time, I had this kid that I really wanted to connect with, and he loved DJing, like that was his passion. I know nothing about DJing, and I couldn't fake it, right? Because that's not a skill that you could just be like, I'm gonna get in there and just pretend that I know what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah.
But instead, what I did is I went to him and I said to him, I really want to learn how to DJ. Would you teach me? And that opened the door, because he was now the expert, and he was showing me what he was already learning, and I was absorbing it, and it gave me an opportunity to be able to kind of almost information share. There were things I knew, there were things that he knew, and we were just going back and forth.
Right.
And so it's just finding things like that I think the more and more. And then the other thing that I'll say, is respecting. I think that one of the biggest mistakes people adult make is that you see someone that's 8 or 7 and you think they're too young to realize what it means to feel respected and seen. And that's not true. If anything, I've learned that younger kids pick up on things so much more than people realize. And so I spend a lot of time making sure, if I want to make sure that I'm treating them the way they want to be treated. And it's really important to me that happens the way it needs to happen, because it's not the same for everybody. Culturally, things change. Different folks for different methods for different people. But it's definitely, if anything, the foundation of kids feeling, dropping their shoulders and going, okay, I wanna start a conversation with you.
Right,
So.
right, right. So, what do you think? Because now you've worked with all age,
Mm-hmm.
ranges. What do you think the average person is looking for?
I think honestly, the same thing that we're all looking for. I think more than ever, people want a sense of safety. And I know that probably sounds very simple, but every single kid that I've talked to, it always comes down to the same thing, like this idea of like feeling that someone's got them, right?
Mm.
That they're being taken care of, that they don't have to worry about, all these unknowns that potentially could happen. And so I do a lot of work of trying to get our kids to like live in the present, because, and this is not unique to them, we do it as adults, right? You either spend a ton of time thinking about the past and what you could have done differently, and then you end up being depressed, or you're anxious about the future and you start thinking about what you don't have and what you could have, and if only I did this and all that. And I try to do a lot of work with our kids and just being like, let's focus on the now, because if you don't, you're gonna miss it. I had one kid that we were at Canopy Lake, and he was so worried about, it was something simple like his grades, I think it was, and there was no way of knowing whether he passed the test or what was going on. And so I said to him, I was like, you have two options. You can get on this roller coaster and enjoy the roller coaster, because it's not going to change. You're not going to know until tomorrow. So enjoy the day, and then tomorrow, whatever comes, we'll figure that out. And that was the other thing too. I was like, we will figure this out. We'll figure out what's going on. He ended up having great grades, but he could have easily had a whole day of just living in fear and anxiety instead of enjoying the day. And so it's just stuff like that. It's just making sure that they so that's one of the things. And I also think that um, our kids more than ever really need adults that are caring adults around them. Um, I can't tell you how many times a simple thing as showing up for someone's like performance or showing up or having just take a minute like we have spoken word and I've had a kid just be like, hey, you got a minute for me to do my spoken word piece, and I sit there and years later what I think was a simple like, yeah, I just took a minute to listen in a speech that they're giving, or they have their own families. And like that day, I couldn't get anybody else, and I really, it's just the small little things, you know what I mean, of connection, feeling like you're seen, feeling like you belong. Um, it hasn't changed. I'm now in my, I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, and it's still the same thing. It's like people want to be a part of something. People want to feel like they can contribute, that they're being seen. So that's what we try to do, as much as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Now for yourself, because we're wrapping up here.
Yeah, yeah.
I know. So
No, you're
I
good.
know we said 1 hour, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But what do you? I have a few questions that I like to ask
Yeah, yeah.
everybody. So,
Please.
what are your goals moving forward? Right. So you were a founder of UTech. You've helped go through the process of finding grants, creating plans for the homeless, and
Yeah.
networking with all these different organizations to help kind of launch ideas to better the community. So, what's your goals moving forward? Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The big piece is this: the Boys and Girls Club is going through a huge capital campaign, and we are going to be adding a teen center. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is because our teens have to walk through the same entrance that our 12 and unders do. And our 12 and unders are like, wow, right? They think they're amazing. But our teens are like, ugh, why am I
As
working with
teens
this?
do,
you
yes.
know,
I have both ages. I get
you
it.
know what I'm saying, right? So we had a lot of conversations with our teens, and we said to them, "What do you guys want?" And it's like, "We want our own dedicated space." So there's gonna be a whole new building just for teens, right? They'll still use some of the spaces here, but they'll have dedicated space. Um, so that's gonna come with a new dance studio. That's gonna come with a black box theater. That's gonna come with a new games room, lounge, terrace for them, expanding of our music clubhouse. So there's a lot coming, a whole workforce department in terms of getting job trainings for our kids. So and placement. So that's going to be that. So in the next 2 years, we're wrapping up that project. There'll be an addition to the front of the Boys and Girls Club, and then on the side of the building, there'll be the teen center. From there, what I'm hoping to do is really start setting up the next generation of youth, workers that are going to be hopefully taking on the club to the next level, right? And so that's kind of like one of the things I learned earlier on is that like a lot of folks, especially when you get older, people start talking about their legacy. And one of the things that I think about is making sure that the things that were put in place continue. And so I love the idea that I have young people that are looking at the profession that I chose as a profession, right? Which was not the case. I didn't even know what a youth worker was when I was a kid. And now I have kids come up to me like, well, Carlos, how do I do your job? How do I do this person's job? I want to do this. And I love that because those are the folks that are going to be able to sustain this moving forward. So that's going to be the next thing. And then we'll see what happens.
Right, right. Um, okay, so I got two questions
Yeah,
and
please.
we'll wrap it up. Um, Looking back at everything you've done, personally or
Yeah.
a community, whichever one you want or both,
Yeah.
what makes you the most proudest as you sit back and think about it?
Oh my God, there's so many things. I think the most proud is knowing that I've impacted young people's lives. Um, I love that UTech exists and it'll continue going. I love that the Boys and Girls Club's around. I love that I'm known in the community and that I
You're
feel
definitely you're definitely known
like
in the community.
I feel like I'm a part of it, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's it's funny because people will say, "Oh, you're a townie." I was like, "Yeah, I love that. I
I
love
love this
I,
city.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
why people see that as a
When
bad
people
thing."
say they want to leave, I'm always like, what?
And the funny thing is, I travel, and the big joke is I'm out for like about a couple of days, and no matter where I'm at, I'm like, I miss home
Yeah.
because there's a sense of like connection. But yeah, so I think but honestly, all those things are really important to me. But the thing that drives me, the thing that gets me excited or gets me into thought of like, wow, that made a difference is when I bump into a young person and they say to me, hey, this because of you or because of someone that worked with me or because of the agency as a whole. I love it. It's not, I think it just makes me feel like what we've done has been worth it, right? And it feels like there's a sense of accomplishment. And the best part is when I see their kids doing games that were taught with us, right? Like they'll be doing icebreakers, and I'm like, I know where you got that from. So
Right.
stuff like that, it's the
Nice.
simple things that I think get me motivated to continue doing what I do.
Right, right. Well, I mean, when it comes to Lowell, the one name I think I've heard the most is yours. When it comes to if you want to talk to somebody, if you need something done, or you just need to have a conversation, Juan Carlos is the guy.
I appreciate
So,
that.
I mean, I appreciate you, man. So my last question to kind of wrap it up
Yeah.
is, if you had to start this process all over again, go back 30 years to the very first time you're gonna go through this whole deal again,
Yeah.
and you could only take one lesson with you to do it all over again and hope to get back here, what would that lesson be for you?
That's tough. I think the one thing I think I would do a lot of it the same way that I did it the first time, with the one exception is I think fear governs too many things, right? And what I mean by that is that there were many times in my career that I took the leap, and then there were times I didn't take the leap because I was scared or I thought I was worried about failure. Um, and I didn't realize it until I got older that now what I do is I just do it, regardless of the outcome, right? Because at least I can say that I experienced that. And so I wish the information that I have now, when I was younger, I could have said that to myself and it's just like, just do it. You worry so much about people, especially when you're younger, and you come to realize that people's attention span, they forget things within like days. And so I wish I could have said to myself, don't worry so much about what potentially could go wrong. Just do it and experiment. And I think that my biggest successes have been when I've done that. When I've been able to just take a chance and just even if I'm terrified inside or I'm worried or whatever the situation is, afterwards I always feel amazing that I've been able to accomplish that. And I don't think enough people talk about that, right? I think a lot of people encourage you, you can do it, but they don't talk about how people are feeling while they're going through that. While you're doing public speaking, while you're talking to somebody in something that's so personal, and you know, people don't really talk about the fact that how the other person might be feeling. And so I think that that's one of the things I would have said to myself is just like, you're gonna be all right. Just keep pushing through. So,
Right. Nice.
so
Nice. All right. So as we wrap up here, how can people find you, contact you, social media? Like, what's the best way to reach Juan Carlos?
So if you want to reach me here at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Lowell, my email is
I'll
jcrivera
put it on the screen too, but
at
yeah,
okay
yeah.
at lbgc.org. And you can contact me at 978-458-4526. And yeah, I welcome anybody if you want to take a tour of the place, or if you want to learn more about what has been happening in the club. I encourage you guys to give us a call.
Sweet. Juan Carlos, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, man,
I
for inviting me.
appreciate it.
This
Yeah,
was
of
fun.
course.
This was a good time.
I had a blast. All right, everybody. I will put Juan Carlos's info at the beginning of the video, at the end of the video, throughout the video, that whole deal. You know it. But other than that, have a good one. Peace.